Hello and welcome to tonight's episode of The Untold. Of course, I'm your host, Abdullah Hindiani. I'm joined by my colleague,
الإثري, and today we have a special guest, Ms. Rawan Alradhwan, who is a board-certified behavior analyst, which I think is a very fascinating thing to be.
It is, yeah, honestly, the thing about, we as people, we don't really think about the intricacies of our characters, right? Our, emotions, our behavior and everything. So to see an active field that analyzes all of this is really fascinating. And I'm really curious to sit down and talk to her about it.
Same. I'm curious to see what she has to say on the subject and how behavior can affect our daily lives from children to adults. And I think we should just find out what she has to say.
We should. And with that in mind, we are going to take a break and we'll come right back with her. And we are back with Ms. Rawan Alradhwan. So first, I want to welcome you on joining us on The Untold.
Thank you for having me.
Rawan, I want to ask you, why did you choose the field that you're in, apart from all other psychologies? You're a certified behavior analyst?
Yes, board certified behavior
Yes,
analyst.
board certified, or BCBA for short.
Yeah.
So tell us more, because I know there's a lot of different branches of psychology. So why did you choose this one?
So I actually was on track in the medical field first, but I ended up taking a class that combined both biology and psychology.
Cool.
It was called the Biological Basis of Behavior. And I just fell in love with behavior and I just wanted to learn more. And the more I learned, and so usually when you work with the kids, you start to see a lot of progress with them. And so seeing that was very beautiful. And so I continued in that field and, I just fell in love with it.
I get it. I did my master's in children's literature because I feel like children themselves are the foundation of everything.
Yeah.
And they really remind you of the joy in life as well.
Yes.
But do you mainly work with children or do you do the other ages as well?
So currently I work with children. I work with children from the ages of anywhere between like 2 to around 14 years old. But in my experience, I have worked with all ages. I've worked with as young as 18 months and as old as 40 years old.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, the field of behavior analysis can work with a variety of different ages.
So let's go back to behavior analysis itself, because for a lot of people, me included, we hear that term, but we don't really know what it means. So can you put it in words what behavior analysis is?
Yeah, of course. So basically, to be a behavior analyst, what we do is we try to understand behavior, not just get rid of something that's bad or difficult, and then teach them a more appropriate skill to be able to meet those needs. So it's basically understanding behaviors and fixing things that need to be fixed, but also at the same time teaching skills and giving those kids a more independent lifestyle.
That makes a lot of sense. And I want to say that especially with children nowadays, the landscape has changed a lot. Technology and social media is really transforming how kids, I think, even their behavior is quite impacted by this. So would you say that the field you're in is very important now because of the situation?
Yes, I definitely think so. What we do tend to see a lot with children is, everything being very digital. They are having more issues with focus, attention, emotion regulation, social skills. And so using behavior analysis in a way that allows these kids to be more in touch with the moment that we're in rather than, everything being digital.
So how does the process usually works? Like, consider me a parent who's walking to your clinic with a troubled child. Like what are the steps that you take to deal with this child?
So usually what happens is when you see something that's a troubled child, we see a child trying to communicate. And so we try to understand why they're communicating. And then from that, we teach them the appropriate skills to be able to meet those needs. We say that behavior is always some sort of communication, whether it's communicating, trying to get attention, trying to communicate, escaping a situation, or access to something.
Would you say a lot of these cases are children who suffer from certain undiagnosed issues like autism or ADHD, or is it also for typical children?
So ABA actually can be used for a variety of children, adults, a variety of diagnosis, no diagnosis. They've actually been trying to use ABA in different applications, not just children that have autism or disabilities. But they also teach athletes how to do certain positions or certain movements with, yeah, it's actually really cool. They teach ballerinas how to do certain dances. You can also teach yourself something. So you can teach yourself how to lose weight, how to get rid of certain habits that you don't like. So ABA actually has so many different strategies. It's just that a lot of it is focused on children because it is one of the fields that we see shows the best progress for these children.
If it's mainly behavioral, though, how does it get to translate to different movements or people in sports exactly? I'm interested.
Yeah, so we actually see behavior as everything that we do. We say something is not a behavior if it passes the dead man test. So if a dead man can do it, it's not a behavior. But if a dead man can't do it, it is a behavior.
So everything, basically.
Basically, yeah. So a lot of people, when they think of behavior analysis, they think of like fixing behaviors that are negative behaviors and, you know, getting rid of things that are quote unquote difficult. But for us, we see anything as a behavior. So we teach kids how to eat, how to use a fork, how to do certain positions with your hands. So with the ballerinas and you know, the football players or American football, they were teaching them how to do certain movements with the ballerinas, certain holds with the balls to be able to throw them. So it mainly uses the procedure of rewarding certain behaviors or certain steps. And so they're able to kind of shape a behavior into the way that they want it to.
Yeah, and from working with so many kids throughout the years, there has been, you know, a centuries-old kind of dilemma, especially between philosophers, whether a behavior is learned or taught, or it's natural. So from working with so many kids, like in your experience, where does behavior come, especially in young kids?
So a lot of the time, it's a bit of both, right? So we do have some behaviors that are involuntary. So you have some reflexes, you go into the sun, your eyes close. If you're in, you know, like there's certain things that your body just has to do when you are in certain environments. Then there are behaviors that are usually learned. And for us, those are everything that you see most of the time. Obviously, there are things that are inherited. Sometimes the kid's more stubborn or things like that. But a lot of the times they're watching their parents and that's how they're developing those, right? So kids learn through observational learning. And that's how they learn everything. Like I see my parents do this, I see these kids do this, I did. And what the consequence based off of that observation is whether I'm gonna engage in that behavior or not. So think of like when you go to a airport and you don't understand the language, you know how to get out of the airport because you follow the people, right? You follow the people walking in a certain direction, or they're going to passport control and things like that. So you're doing it through observation. And you see that they're exiting, so you do that. But if you see that they're going somewhere else and they're maybe going to a transfer or whatnot, you change your behavior because obviously that's not giving you the consequence of what it is that you want. So long story short, the way that a kid basically learns is I'll see something that my mom might do and I see that she gets attention for it. So I might do it to get attention in the future. So a lot of the times it is learned behavior, but of course, biologically, there are some things that are involuntary.
I think that's really fascinating because I think a lot of parents are unaware of how their own behaviors affect their kids. And they think that they can just kind of punish the kids or yell at them to follow what they believe is the right behavior, but they're unaware of the stuff that they're giving off in their everyday life. Like my mom used to say all the time when I was a kid, do as I say, not as I do. And it's like, well, that's not going to work because I'm going to do what you do because you're my mom. So I'm going to believe subconsciously that's the right stuff to do. But why do you think a lot of parents go towards punishment instead of trying to understand?
Well, it's kind of what we're taught, right? Like we've always been taught to get a child to do the things that you want, you have to discipline them, and usually that is in a form of punishment. In applied behavior analysis, the way that we actually look at punishment is only punishment if you see that in the future it decreases, right? So in the case of like your mom telling you, do what I say and not what I do. If I tell you what to do and you do it, is there some sort of reward for it? Is it acknowledged? Is it not? But if I do what you tell me, or if I do what you do, right, and I get a lot of attention for it, whether it's negative attention, I'm more likely going to end up doing the thing that gets me that acknowledgement, whether it's negative or positive, because that's the thing that's getting me the attention and it's getting me all the things that I want, right? But punishment is our go-to thing. And a lot of the times I do tend to see parents actually, I tell them you technically are tiring yourself because you do something expecting to see a result, but there is no result because your child doesn't see it as punishment. So we all view punishment in a different way. That's why we see it as only if it decreases in the future. You might threaten a child, I'll take your iPad away. And the child might not care about his iPad being taken away. So you think you're punishing the child, and then you say, why doesn't this behavior happen? Like, why doesn't it stop in the future? And the child is like, I don't care about my iPad. I have my phone. I have my PS5. I have something else to do, right? So punishment is only punishment if we do see an actual future decrease in the behavior. And punishment also, a lot of the times, doesn't really teach the child the more appropriate things later on to do, right? It just teaches them what not to do, quote unquote. But I think that's why we tend to go into punishment, because that's what we've just been taught to do, and that's what we think shows us results.
Yeah, and I think there isn't, a perfect solution. But if you were to, give advice on what is the best course of action for parents to take, is it the system of rewards, or is there another optimal approach to it?
I think the easiest thing that a parent can do is the reward system, yeah, because it's something that can be implemented very naturally. It can be done in the home. It's so easy to do. It doesn't take time from the parents. And just that slight, rewarding the child can change the whole environment. It can reduce frustration. It can reduce emotional meltdowns. It can also help with communication, because the child has expectations and they know what those expectations are, and then based off of that they're getting rewarded for the expectations. So if parents can actually learn how to catch good behaviors and reward that as much as possible, they'll see big change in their home environments.
Yeah. And it worked, because I saw a documentary once, I think it was called Economics or something like that, where they applied economy theories on a school. And the thing that helped one class, excel in grades was the reward system.
Yeah.
Like each grade, they would reward them with something, whether it was monetary prizes or, games or toys. But the class that functioned the most is the class that had rewards.
The rewards, yeah. And we have different forms of rewarding groups as well. It's not just individuals. And I've seen studies where they've also been teaching like children that have, or like juvenile delinquents, on how to become more appropriate and have more, independent and more adult-like behaviors later on, especially like as a recovery program or whatnot, using reinforcement or ABA. And they see that there is success to it, because when people, all of us, I think, when we know what is expected, it's much easier for us to know what steps to take next. And then when you are rewarded and acknowledged throughout those steps, it becomes a lot easier for you to go to the next one.
I agree entirely, because I'm a big believer you get more with honey than with, that's not the quote exactly, but you catch more flies with honey than you do with, I don't remember what it is, salt or some other
machine gun.
What?
The machine gun.
Yeah, and with a machine gun.
But I know what
yeah, but in general, it's like always makes more sense to get rewards. Like I am like that. If you tell me that I'm doing well, I will continue to follow that line. Whereas if you punish me, a part of me is stubborn and I'll be like, well, fine. I just won't do anything then.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are like that too.
Yeah.
A lot of us like that acknowledgement and like that attention. And, speaking about attention, a lot of the times people don't notice that like attention is attention, negative, positive, it doesn't matter, right? So when I get that acknowledgement, I get that attention, I'm going to continue doing it.
Yeah.
So it's better to give it for things that are more appropriate, right, than the things that are not appropriate, or the things that don't really get you access to things that make you more independent and give you a more meaningful life.
And it's also, I was reading an article about child abuse. It says that the first couple of times it might work, but then the child realizes that, that kind of pain goes away, and then they can go back to whatever they're trying to do. And so over time, being violent towards children doesn't work as much as the previous generation used to think, because children know, they're going to get hit now, but then it's okay. After a few days, they're going to go back to what they're doing. It's like, okay, I'm used to it by now.
Especially if there is that cycle that is very predictable. Kids are a lot smarter than we actually give them credit for.
I agree.
Right? And they learn through observing everything, right? And so I do hear a lot of time, oh yeah, no, they're kids, and we don't give them credit. And they do catch on these cycles. They do catch on when you're predictable, and so they use those sometimes in moments to benefit them, And so if I know that I'm going to get punished, and the punishment that I'm getting is not, something that's drastic, then I'm going to continue doing, you know? And it's actually what I tell parents most of the time, and what the field of ABA looks at is, if you reward the things that you want to see more, just in return, you'll start to see the things that you don't want to see decrease. It's because, you know, they get more attention for these things that are better, and they get more access to things, and, you know, and so the more you do it, the more access of things you get to it, and you start to see everything else just inherently decrease, because why do I have to engage in these things if they don't really get me access to anything?
Honestly, I agree entirely. But we are going to go on a short break, and then I hope we can discuss this stuff further because it's so interesting. And so stay tuned for after the break.
And we are back. I do want to go back on the topic of parents, because I know from speaking to a lot of my friends who are parents, whenever they're talking about their kids or their troubled kids, I tell them, well, I've read this and that, and it works. And then the parents are like, we know that it works, but, you know, we just don't want to do it. So why do you think a lot of parents know the right solution or know the tricks of the deal, but they don't actually do it?
So I think that there are more than one reason. One reason is the fact that it's harder to implement things, of course, when you're in the moment, right? You know a lot of information, but when your child is screaming and you're frustrated and you're overwhelmed, it's a lot harder for you to be able to implement it. Another thing is, I think that with being, you know, a parent in the household with so many other kids around, with so many responsibilities and different things, they don't always have the time to be able to implement something that can be really difficult or lengthy, or it takes a lot of time and effort, especially when they're busy. You know, they have other kids that they're responsible, you know, for, and all of the other things. So I think those are the two main reasons. But the most one, I think, is emotions come into play whenever you're in the moment. You can read something, and obviously you read it in a calm way. You think it's easy to implement, and then you're in the moment, you're frustrated, you're overwhelmed, your child is frustrated, your child is overwhelmed. It becomes really difficult to be able to implement them in those moments. And I think that's why it's hard for them. So sometimes having that support, or even just having that conversation with someone, gives you enough motivation to go ahead and, you know, implement one of those things, or try to at least implement it into the household.
That makes a lot of sense. And I feel like, especially maybe for young kids, it's easier to discipline them up to a certain point because they're quite young. When you start to get to the more teenage years, there's a lot more stubbornness and a lot more feeling that you can talk back or do things behind their back. And that makes the parents more angry and more strict. But sometimes that actually backfires even more. Like, I've seen situations in my own family where they're causing a lot of trouble, they're doing things they're not supposed to, and they'll be punished more and more. But as you said, at one point, the punishment stops mattering, and therefore the behavior doesn't change. So what would you recommend for parents to do in these kind of situations?
So I mean, we always look at reward behaviors rather than punish them. So my first thing would be, obviously, try to reward all the other good stuff and hope that in return they would not have to engage in the other ones. Another thing would be, if you are going into punishment, because punishment is easier for people, that is why it's also one of their go-to. I want to decrease the behavior quickly rather than increase all the other stuff and then this one slowly start to decrease. So changing the type of punishment or the punisher. So increasing the value of the punishment obviously changes the person's behavior. But I always recommend, obviously, rewarding rather than punishing the child.
Would you also say that perhaps, in terms of rebellion, is it a cry for help or underlying any other issues, or is it just the kid acting out?
So usually it is the child trying to communicate something. Whether they have the skill to be able to communicate it, you know, maybe they're not able to talk about their emotions, or if we're talking about a child that has autism, they might not be able to speak, they might not. So a lot of things do go into play into why a child does not listen or why they rebel. But a lot of the times it is something that I'm trying to communicate. I'm not just rebelling because I want to rebel and it just makes me happy, you know? There's always something to it. Like, we say that a behavior continues because of the consequence that is provided to it. So if I am hungry and I eat, I know in the future that when I'm hungry, I eat, right? Because the consequence, I got full and I was happy. If I go down a certain road that I know that I go down every single day, and then one day the road is closed, now in punishment, my behavior changes, I go to another side, and like, so we know that a lot of things go into play. It's not just one thing, but most of the time it is some sort of lack of skill, and finding out what it is to be able to give the more appropriate skill to meet those needs or whatever it is I'm trying to communicate is the best thing to do, rather than just assume that your child is a rebellious child or, you know.
And what about success rate? Because I know, and I'm not, comparing the two, but there's an argument for the prison system is that they should be called rehabilitation systems because they are changing, the behavior of the inmates. But there's another school of thought that says, a behavior cannot be changed. So in terms of children, especially troubled ones, what would you say is the success rate, of actively and successfully improving their behavior, especially now with social media, with phones, with video games all the time under their hands?
So I think the main thing is consistency. The more consistent you are, the more success you start to see. I've seen children go from completely not being able to speak, maybe have minimal eye contact, not like minimal skills, to becoming one of the most sassiest talking back child that you will ever meet, like to the point where this kid was really funny. We're talking about like a 3 or 4-year-old kid, okay? And this was when I was in the States. At one point, we lost the kid. We didn't know where he was, right? We didn't lose him, but he was in the center. We just didn't know where he was. And you would hear giggling, and this kid hid himself in the fridge.
What?
Right? And he's giggling and he's waiting, and you open, you're like, I found you. And he's like, no, you didn't find me. You just like, he was so sassy and he was so, quote unquote, naughty, right? Like, but he went from a child that would barely engage in any eye contact, had zero social skills, zero anything, to literally talking your ear off, hiding in the fridge, jumping up and down, like different, talking all the time. And you see the huge difference. And not every child obviously has that success story, but a lot of them do. And it's really beautiful seeing the way that the family becomes a whole family, being able to communicate with each other and having that support and feeling at ease, rather than, struggling, always trying to trying to figure out what your child's communicating, being overwhelmed. And, so we know that ABA does have a high success rate, but it does depend per child. And if there is any medical things that interfere, and of course, consistency, is the key. Like, that is the main thing that you can do to see the fastest results.
I think that's wonderful. And actually, it reminds me, my youngest brother, for a good time, he wouldn't speak properly. He could speak a little bit, but he chose to scream a lot instead to get attention or do things. And we took him to a place where they deal with behavioral problems and stuff. And in time, he's speaking normally, he knows how to communicate what he wants. So I really saw how the results were applied to a real child, and it's amazing. However, my dad, I think he just saw okay, it's done now, there's no more work to be done. But I feel like it's an ongoing thing. So when it comes to parents, what would you recommend for them? How would they know if they need to see a specialist or if it's something they can deal with at home?
So most of the times, if you feel like you've done everything and you just don't think anything is working, that's usually when you have to see a specialist. Sometimes I see parents, they say that the child is not progressing as fast as his peers. If you've tried everything and they have all the appropriate supports in place, maybe you should see a specialist. Those are usually the times that I would tell a parent to reach out to somebody. But in the case of your brother, for example, yes, it is an ongoing thing, because when you think about it, even us all as adults, we need to always talk to somebody and help fix our behaviors, and so I think therapy is an ongoing thing for a lot of people, and it's always good to have that support in case you need it. It's not necessarily something that has to be always consistent or that it's taking up your daily life or anything, but having that support in case you need it, I think, is always also good.
So I imagine the root, cause, or the root, type of behavior, to fix this kind of behavior, is actually dealing with the parents themselves. And I know that in our culture, in our society, for a long time, we've had this stigma, of going to therapists, going to psychologists, is, I don't want people to see me like that, because for some reason, we do have that kind of, blemish. So in your experience, have you found it, easier or more difficult to work with parents, especially when it comes to their children's, mentality?
I think now times are changing, so you see that a lot of parents are, taking the steps necessary. But I've seen both. I've seen some parents that are a little bit more in denial. I've seen parents that, of course, are trying to educate as much as possible. They want to be trained. They want to, But you're right. It does always stem from the people that are with the child the most, right? So if you are in school environments or in the home environment, and whatever consequences that are happening in those environments are usually what maintains those behaviors. So sometimes you have parents that will struggle with some things at home, but school doesn't ever see it or struggle with it, or people that interact with the kid never see it or struggle with it. And that goes back to it's the parents providing certain consequences to that behavior that allows the child to engage with those parents, right? Same thing goes to school. You have teachers, they do certain things with kids that reinforces behaviors, because it's very typical, when you have so many different kids in the classroom. Same thing at home. It's very typical when you have different responsibilities and different things to do to reward these behaviors. So you see that it changes, obviously. So it is very important for parents to take the steps necessary if they feel like they need it. But for sure, it definitely does start with the consequences that is being provided with the parents.
Well, thank you so much. I feel like we learned a lot. And I loved hearing how reinforcement and focusing on positive behavior is some of the best ways to get a child to kind of listen, and that parents really should try to get a more trusting relationship with their child, and, just make sure that they're doing what they can for the kid to become them best selves.
Yeah.
But I want to thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
And with that, we're going to go on a short break, so stay tuned.
With that, it concludes today's episode of The Untold, another amazing episode, highly educational on a very important topic.
It was. I feel like we learned so much, and I loved hearing how reward-based systems tend to work better for all kinds of, ages, because I'm a big believer in that myself. I think positive reinforcement goes a long way.
Yeah, and honestly, it reminds me of one of my friends who said that when his children were grown up, he used to give his children, half a KD or 1 dinar whenever they get good grades. And honestly, it sounds trivial, but it works, right? If you're a child and if you get bad grades, you're not rewarded with something. You feel like you've done something wrong, as opposed to being, angry or violent toward the kid. Reward systems do work.
I agree. And the fact that she said that a lot of the times when kids act out, it's because they want attention, or they just can't communicate what they're actually thinking about. So we have to reframe our thoughts and our emotions based on what the child is actually doing.
Yeah, and honestly, I think that's a very important topic, is that, when you label someone a kid, a lot of people, don't really consider the importance of that label, right? They see them as people, they see them as, equal individuals, when they are just trying to learn the world, right? They're trying to process whatever is happening to them. They're still in their infancy stages, right? They're seeing the world from A to Z. So you got to take that into account whenever you're dealing with them.
I agree entirely. And I do think that she really managed to tell us about how behaviors are everyday things for all ages. And it's not just what you think. Anything you do is a behavior. Like when she mentioned the ballerina and the sports person, yeah. I thought that was really, really cool.
It was cool. We are thankful for her for joining us. We are also thankful for the viewers for tuning in. But that's the end of us from the Untold team. Until the next one, goodbye for now.
Goodbye.